What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to Super Carmio. In today's episode of the Miata Turbo Build, we are going to be installing an Autometer boost gauge and mountain cup. A boost gauge is important because it basically lets us know how much boost we're running, as well if there's an issue, if we're seeing overboost conditions or a vacuum leak where air is entering the system that's unaccounted for. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on all the essentials in terms of how your engine is operating, especially with a car that came from the factory naturally aspirated. So I think this will complete the gauges for the Miata that we're planning to run, which included the coolant gauge, air-fuel ratio, and now the boost gauge. With that being said, for the purposes of this video, since we are still naturally aspirated, the gauge will only operate in vacuum up to 0 psi. And that's just because when there's a piston moving down, it's going to be sucking the air outside of the intake manifold, leaving an absence of pressure. All right, let's jump into the install. So the first step is to locate a vacuum port on your intake manifold. And if you guys remember from that Mega Squirt install, we installed a vac line that ran to the ECU right here, and I commented that I would leave a port open, and so we're just going to use this port that I capped off previously, and then we're going to run the vacuum line through the firewall just like we've done in past installs. Alright, now that we have our vacuum line, we're just going to decide where we want to mount the gauge, and I'm thinking right here, kind of in between the two dials. So we're going to disassemble this steering column real quick. And this is how we're going to assemble the mountain cup. So we have our main bracket, it's going to sit on top of our mountain surface, and then you have this little ring that goes around the cup that is going to go over those two holes, and there's provided hardware to hold this into place. So the first thing we'll do is just center this. It is a little weird because this rectangle actually isn't symmetrical, so I think it's about right there, so we'll just mount it right there. Okay, so here's the mountain bracket mounted to the top of the steering column cover. Now I'm going to get the electrical components ready. So technically you don't need any power to get this gauge working, so you could hook up this vacuum port and it'd work out of the box. However, there's some backlighting, and for that you'll need to hook up a ground and a 12-volt power supply. So let's get those wires ready. For the ground side, I'll attach a ring connector so we could attach this to a stud somewhere. To mount the cup on the holder, you'll use this little spacer that goes here, and then on each side you'll screw it in with these provided bolts with these star washers. And once you have everything in place how you like it, you'll tighten those bolts fully. After that, you'll tuck your vacuum line behind the steering column so it comes up right here, and then also you'll tuck your power and ground wires through there. After you run your wires, you're just going to trim this vacuum line and then reattach the steering column cover. After the covers are reconnected, it's time to complete the installation by hooking up the electrical. I'm just going to chain it to the power that's powering the existing two gauges, and then I'm just going to find a stud for the ground. So everything is hooked up. Our electrical line's connected, our vacuum line. In terms of what you should be seeing on startup, it should be pulling around 20 inches of mercury. That's pretty much a healthy motor. So let's give this a try. That completes the installation of the boost gauge for today, as well as all the gauges that I plan to run in the Miata. I consider AFR, coolant, and boost pretty much the essentials anytime you're turboing your car. You could add oil temperature and pressure if you're going to do some serious track time, but I think for the purposes of this car, these three should suffice. In the next few videos, we're going to concentrate on actually getting the turbo installed as well as repairing the motor. So we're going to drill the oil pan for the oil return, get the oil feed and coolant lines also run. I hope you guys are learning something new from this series. I'll catch you next time. Peace out.